A selection committee that places me in the same room with the all-time leading NHL goal scorer from the state of Wisconsin, the all-time NHL leading goal scorer from the state of Massachusetts, the all-time longevity defenseman in the history of the sport, regular season and playoffs, and the current longevity operator of a sports franchise, the Philadelphia Flyers, makes me want to thank the committee a great deal that we could all be together here. And the fact that this is in Chicago, it is not my hometown as it was with Chris. But I grew up, 5'7". I was raised in the state of Indiana, not too far from here, 185 miles away, in a little town of 600. You always remember where you went for your first baseball game. And that was 35th and Shields, White Sox and the Yankees. Chico Carrasquel was the shortstop for the White Sox. Phil Rizzuto was the shortstop for the Yankees. I'm not 35 anymore. I have been a Pittsburgh Pirates lover for 53 years. For the last 19, the love has not been returned. But the first time I ever got to see my team play was at Clark and Addison, August 9th, 1959. Vern Law pitched for the Pirates, and Ernie Banks hit one into Waveland Avenue to lead off the second inning. The Pirates rallied, and Elroy Face, shorter than me, came in relief and got the win for my guys. I never forgot that trip. Then the first game that I ever saw the Blackhawks play was at Chicago Stadium against the Boston Bruins in 1970. And the one thing that I admire about the Blackhawks then and the Blackhawks now is how little has changed. Oh yes, some years were better than others, some years produced championships, but there was a consistency. There was Lloyd Pettit, and now there's Pat Foley and John Weideman. There was a guy named Billy Ray behind the bench, and now you have this great guy, Joel Quenneville. The hierarchy was the same. Al Melgard played the organ, and now it's Frank Pellico. Bob Verdi was the writer, and now, among others, Tim Sasson. Harvey Wittenberg made sure that we knew how much time was left in each period. I had 2 conversations with William Wirtz, not about hockey, about dogs. He had 2, we have 2. And now I have an autographed book from Rocky. His 2 dogs are pictured on the cover. Things don't really change that much. One of my favorite broadcasters, Paul Harvey, worked only 2 blocks away from where we are right now. But the United States put a team in Squaw Valley in 1960. As a nearsighted, bespectacled, bubblegum-blowing youth, I got a chance to see the 1960 team on a fuzzy black and white Hallicrafters television as they played in Squaw Valley that last game against the Czechs. CBS had been carrying a game of the week at that time on Saturday afternoons, and Bud Palmer was the announcer. He was the announcer for the Olympics. And I remember the day that the Czechs lost to the United States and the United States won gold medals. Bill Cleary told me just a year ago, Jack Currain, the captain of the team, was handed the medals. It was up to him to give one to each one of the players. Jack took his own medal back to Boston, put it in the glove box of his pickup truck, went back to work as a firefighter. That was 1960, and I had started to pester my parents to take me to a professional hockey game, and we had a team in Fort Wayne, Indiana called the Comets. December 10th, 1960, I had wanted to be a baseball announcer until I went to a game at the old Coliseum. It was new at that time. It was the orange and black Fort Wayne Comets against the Toronto Maple Leaf kind of uniform Muskegon Zephyrs. I was mystified that the Seifert's potato chip Zamboni did not also chew up the red and blue lines and deposit them in the bin as well. I didn't realize that was how it worked. I didn't know what icing was. It didn't matter. There were screens around the circumference of the rink. I thought it was to keep the paying customers out. I saw how rough the game was and realized it was supposed to keep some of the players that wanted to escape in. We had a player on Fort Wayne's team named Con Madigan. Con Mad Dog Madigan became a hero of mine. He would later become the oldest rookie in the history of the National Hockey League, playing on the same team with gentle John Davidson at age 38. Con Madigan, with the goaltender pulled that night in Fort Wayne, scored one of his rare goals, skated around the entire ice surface backwards to celebrate. You don't forget that happening. It was Con Madigan and the player coach for the Muskegon Zephyrs, Moose Lalo, who showed the real attitude. In the 10-minute sudden death overtime, they had a fight with 2 seconds to go. And you know what appeals to me most? Within the last 10 days, I have heard from Moose Lalo and Con Madigan about this night. That means a lot to me. By the way, the man who broadcast the game that night in Fort Wayne was the guy I grew up listening to. His name is Bob Chase. Tonight, Bob is in Wichita, Kansas, with the Comets before their game tomorrow night in the CHL. Bob will be 86 in January. He has done the Comets for 59 years on 50,000 watts. He has spoken to more people about our sport in the United States than any other broadcaster. My wish for him is that he is standing here very soon. Bob Chase. He gives us all hope for the future. 1938 was the second Stanley Cup for the Chicago Blackhawks. An American-trained coach won the championship for the first time. His name was Bill Stewart. His grandson, Paul, later refereed in the National Hockey League. I'm sure you 3 guys had a lot of arguments with him. He was also a referee in 3 different sports. He officiated football, professional hockey, and also Major League Baseball. And he was the crew chief of the umpires who worked the 1951 playoff series between the Dodgers and the Giants when Bobby Thompson hit the shot around the world. Years later, Americans in hockey in the 1979, it was the 80 Olympic team, but it was the fall of 79. Ed Snyder had created an American League team in Portland, Maine. The Maine Mariners resembled the Philadelphia Flyers in a couple of respects. The makeup of our team was some good skill guys and some delightful thugs. And so in came the Americans to play an exhibition game against the 2-time champion Maine Mariners, and I would like to say that our Mariners beat our Americans that night decisively. It would be a decisive lie. The Americans showed us an awful lot. We had no idea it was going to become what it did 3 months later. We were in Halifax, Nova Scotia, playing a game against the Nova Scotia Voyageurs, the Montreal farm team, the night that the Americans were playing the Soviets in Lake Placid. We did not get to see the game. Many of you saw it much later that evening. But what a conquest by that group. Chris Chelios played in the 1984 Olympics in Sarajevo, as he mentioned. A friend of mine, Eddie Olczyk, was also there. They recounted the other day that one of the rare times it was ever allowed in the Olympics, there was a brawl before the Canadian-U.S. game at the Olympics. Why? They'd played each other 20 exhibition games, and they just about had enough. I got to see the 1996 World Cup. I got a pass, and I got a headset, and I got in free. That's one of the real motivating factors of this career ever starting, was I got in free. John Davidson and I got to see that wonderful miracle. I'm not going to talk a lot about 96 because I want to leave some room for the guys who lived it and were a part of wearing that proud American jersey. But 2 weeks ago, I saw the goaltender, Mike Richter, in New York. And I said, Mike, you were the MVP, and I remember them wheeling out a motorcycle. They gave you a motorcycle for being the MVP. Now, Mike didn't strike me as a motorcycle type, but they wheeled out a motorcycle for him, and I asked him whatever became of that. He said within 10 days it was in New York. I gave it to the New York firefighters. They auctioned it off, and they did real well. And I thought to myself, I watched all 3 of those thrilling games. Mike Richter did real well, too. I got a free pass and a headset to watch in 1998 in Nagano a group of women. First time ever that women's hockey was going to be a medal sport in the Olympics. Their coach, Ben Smith, the morning of the gold medal game against Canada, and remember, the United States had a history of getting silver medals against Canada every year, called the team to center ice. They were watching him and listening to him, and occasionally we'd hear a response from them, and then very quiet, and then they would continue on. John Davidson and I were at the boards, and the team left, and they resumed practicing. Ben Smith came over, and John said, I know some of this is privilege, but do you mind telling me what you said to them? Glad you asked the question, John. I was curious too, but I had no courage. He said, I told them a golf story. I said, years ago when I learned how to play golf, when my ball landed on the green and I was away, I would wind up putting first. When the other guy was away, he would putt first. If I was closest to the cup, he would putt first, and I would hope he'd miss his shot. As I got better, as I progressed, I started hoping he'd make his shot because it would make me be better. That's where you are with Canada now. Sandra White into the empty net, 3-1 United States, first women's gold to our gang. It was a great lifetime memory for me. You look back over all this period of time. Dean, are you keeping my time? I probably need some help. And I am able to work distraction-free with NBC and Versus because of a man named Sam Flood, who keeps us all straight, and we know our parameters, and we know we have support. That means an awful lot. I am able to work without worry and with incredible help because of a colleague named Eddie Olczyk, who is here tonight. And I should mention, he is the leading NHL scorer from this grand state of Illinois. Eddie Olczyk works with Pat Foley. Where is he? Pat Foley and I have talked about working with Eddie, and Pat maintains that Eddie has a photographic memory, and I think he's right. How he can dissect a goal so quickly and determine where the fault was and show it to you and telestrate it is a marvel. But then I thought, if he has a photographic memory, why does he need to purchase a racing form? My life in St. Clair, Michigan is kept distraction-free because of my wife of 33 years, who stood up in a church and promised to love and obey in sickness and in health. In 1990, there was an awful lot of sickness. And you appreciate it as time passes and you become cancer-free again, and you are able to resume your work and be a part of something as fun as hockey is. I thank my wife, Joyce, for all of those years of loyalty and watching lots of hockey games. And I am grateful for the fact that she and I and our family are able to be involved in hockey in a country that is free. 2 million people are active service men and women. 24 million are veterans. 70 million more or so are grandparents, parents, spouses, children who worry about people they know and love who are in the service. Keith's father, John, was a Marine. Gary's father, Marlo, Naval Reserve. Chris's father in Greece in the Air Force. We are well served by all of these millions of people who work, have worked, or worry about those who are working, and I am grateful for them. Several cannot be here tonight because their schedules have them elsewhere. Lou Lamorello, a loyal USA Hockey guy, is with the Devils in Tampa. I have heard that he has made a trade today. I don't know who's involved. Most of you who have hand devices probably are well aware of it by now. He has done a very good job in my life in handing out jewelry every once in a while, and that is always appreciated. Jack Vivian, the coach that I first worked with at Bowling Green State University, liked him so much I invited him to our wedding. He was the first one in the reception line. The Maine Mariners had just won a championship 2 months earlier, and Jack greeted me and said, "Congratulations, win a championship, get careless, don't you?" Thank you also to people that I can't have here tonight, my parents who understood that I loved the hockey life, and occasionally they were teachers. They would get Joyce aside some summer and say, "Do you think Mike's ever going to get a real job?" Dave Peterson, Bob Johnson, a broadcast partner named Herb Brooks, my first general manager, Morris Snyder, and to a guy who was the non-academic advisor at Bowling Green for my doctoral dissertation, a gentleman named Ernie Harwell. I learned a lot about sportscasting and a lot about life from Ernie Harwell, and once he said, "A person is lucky if God gives him a job that he enjoys." Well, I count myself as lucky to have so many friends who I have been able to talk to tonight, to have had friends who are no longer with us, and to also have an award like has been presented to me, and that I could be here with you. Thank you so much.